The early morning sun rose slowly over the rolling green hills of the Cherokee land. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the sweet smell of pine needles and wildflowers. Birds called out from the forest as if unaware of the heavy silence that hung over the people gathered near the river. Dozens of villagers stood in a wide circle, their faces serious, their eyes fixed on the center where a young woman knelt on the ground. Her name was Ayita. She was only 19, with long dark hair braided down her back and a quiet strength in her eyes. She had grown up in this village, learned to gather herbs from the forest, to sing the old songs, and to respect the traditions that had been passed down through generations. She was one of them. But today she stood apart, not because of how she looked, but because of what they believed she had done. The river sparkled softly behind her, its surface like glass. The sky was so blue that it almost hurt to look at it, but Ayita barely noticed. Her heart was beating fast and her hands trembled slightly. Around her, the villagers whispered among themselves. Some looked at her with anger, some with sadness, and others avoided looking at her at all. The elders stood in a line at the front of the circle. Their faces were calm but firm. They wore robes decorated with colorful beads and feathers that showed their rank and wisdom. These were the people who decided the fate of anyone who broke the tribal laws. For centuries, their word had been final. Ayita took a slow breath. The ground beneath her knees felt cold, though the sun had already warmed the earth. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes. She remembered when she was a child, sitting by the fire at night while her grandmother told her stories about honor, courage, and loyalty to the tribe. She had always believed in those values. She had never wanted to hurt anyone. But life has a way of placing people at crossroads, and sometimes the path chosen comes with a price. A quiet voice called her name. It was Kaya, her younger brother. He was standing just behind the line of villagers, his fists clenched at his sides. His dark eyes were wide with fear and confusion. He was only 16. Ayita gave him a small, soft smile as if to tell him, "It will be all right." But deep inside, she wasn't sure if it really would be. The elder in the center stepped forward. His voice was deep and steady, carrying across the entire gathering. He spoke of the laws of their people, of loyalty to the tribe, of old promises made long before Ayita was born. His words were heavy, and the silence that followed them was even heavier. He spoke of the night when Ayita had found a young settler child wandering near the forest's edge. The child had been weak, lost, and afraid. It was a dangerous time for strangers. The tribe feared outsiders. They believed their world needed to stay protected from those who might bring change, pain, or loss. But Ayita had not turned away. She had given the child water, wrapped them in a blanket, and led them to safety. To some, this was kindness. To others, it was a break in the invisible wall that kept the tribe safe. Many had begged the elders to understand her heart. They had said she did not mean harm, but tradition was strict. It said that helping outsiders without permission could bring danger to the tribe. It was a line that must not be crossed. The elder raised his hand and the whispers stopped. "Ayita," he said, his voice echoing, "you chose the path of mercy, but mercy to an outsider is seen by many as a wound to your people. Our laws are older than we are. They keep us safe, and when someone breaks them, the land itself must decide their fate." Ayita kept her head high. She didn't speak, because she knew that no words would change their minds. She had already tried to explain. She had already told them that she could not let a child die in the cold, but they had not listened. They believed she had opened a door that should have stayed closed. The elder nodded slowly as if giving a signal to the others. Two women from the tribe, strong and serious, stepped forward and gently guided Ayita toward the edge of the clearing. The ground there was soft and sandy near the riverbank. It was the place where those who were to face judgment were taken. As she walked, she felt the earth under her bare feet. She heard the quiet sound of water flowing nearby. The sky above her was endless and bright, but everything around her felt distant, almost like a dream. She didn't cry. She didn't fight. She only held on to the last clear memory she had of the child she had saved. Small hands gripping hers tightly, soft eyes filled with trust. That memory gave her a kind of quiet strength. The crowd followed in silence. Even the birds seemed to hush. When they reached the sandy place, the elders formed a half circle, while the villagers stood behind them. It felt as though the entire world had gathered to watch this one moment. Ayita stepped into the sand. It was cool against her feet, soft but firm. Two young men began to dig carefully, making a space deep enough for her to stand inside. This was their way, a test of time and spirit. The earth was not meant to harm, only to wait. Some people survived, others did not. It depended on strength, on will, and sometimes on the kindness of nature itself. Kaya tried to step forward, but an older woman placed a hand on his arm and shook her head. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. His heart screamed louder than any voice could. When the hole was ready, Aida stepped inside without needing to be pushed. She kept her back straight and her eyes forward. The sand rose higher and higher as they began to fill the space again. Gently, firmly. It pressed around her legs, then her waist, then her chest. She felt the weight of it holding her still. She focused on her breathing, slow and steady. Above her, the sun was climbing higher. The air smelled of pine and earth. She could see the faces of her people, some hard and cold, others full of worry. Kaya's face was the one she held on to. She remembered when he was a little boy running through the forest, laughing as she chased him with wildflowers in her hands. She remembered holding his hand when their father had passed away. She remembered promising him she would always be there. As the sand reached her shoulders, she tilted her head back slightly to look at the sky. A small white cloud drifted lazily above, free and light. She wished for a brief moment that she could float away with it. Finally, the sand came to her neck. She could no longer move. All that remained free was her face turned toward the sky. She felt the soft wind brush against her cheeks. Someone placed a woven cloth over her head to shield her from the harsh sun. It was tradition, a silent gesture of both judgment and care. The elder spoke again. "The land will decide," he said softly. "If your heart is strong, if the spirits believe in your truth, they may give you back to us. If not, they will keep you." The crowd began to slowly walk away. One by one, the villagers returned to their homes, to their fires, to their daily lives. But even as they left, the silence stayed behind. Only Kaya remained standing at the edge of the sand. His hands were shaking. He wanted to run to her, but he knew that if he did, the punishment would fall on him too. Aita closed her eyes. The sun warmed her skin. She could hear the river's soft voice beside her like a lullaby. She could taste the salt of her own tears, though she didn't remember crying. She thought of the child she had saved. She thought of the small, frightened face looking up at her that night in the forest. She thought of the words her grandmother used to whisper, "Kindness lives longer than fear." Those words had guided her every step of her life. And even now, standing at the edge of life and death, she did not regret what she had done. Hours passed slowly. The shadows grew longer. Her legs felt numb under the sand, but her mind stayed sharp. She listened to every sound. The wind in the trees, the soft splash of fish in the water, the rustle of leaves. She imagined herself walking through the forest, free again, feeling the earth under her feet. She whispered a quiet prayer, not asking for rescue, but thanking the world for the years she had lived, the faces she had loved, the choices she had made. She felt fear, yes, but she also felt peace. She knew that kindness was never truly forgotten, even if it came with a price. The sky slowly began to change color. Golden light spread across the land as the sun lowered toward the horizon. The forest seemed to glow. The world felt quiet but not empty. Somewhere, hidden among the trees, something shifted. Aita didn't see it. Her eyes were closed, her breath soft and slow. She was ready to accept whatever came. But deep inside, a small spark of hope, just a flicker, remained alive. A hope that perhaps the story wasn't over yet. The night came softly over the forest like a dark blanket covering the world. A silver moon rose above the trees, shining its quiet light on the river. The stars glittered gently in the wide sky, as if the heavens were watching over everything below. The air grew cooler and the song of the crickets became louder. Aita was still there, buried up to her neck in the soft sand near the riverbank. Her body felt heavy, but her mind was awake. She had been there since the sun was high, and now the world around her had changed. The day's warmth had faded, and the soft touch of the night air brushed against her face. Her eyelids felt tired, but she kept them open for as long as she could. She wanted to remember every detail. The shape of the moon, the way the wind moved through the trees, the scent of earth and pine. These were the things she had loved since childhood. They felt like old friends standing beside her now. The village had grown quiet. Most people had returned to their homes. Fires flickered softly in the distance, sending thin trails of smoke into the night sky. She could almost hear the faint rhythm of drums far away, a song to keep the night alive. Aita took a deep breath. The air felt cold in her chest. She whispered softly to herself, "If this is my last night, let me remember it." She thought of her family, of Kaya's face, of the river she used to play in when she was a little girl. She thought of her grandmother's stories, the ones about how the earth listens to kind hearts. She didn't notice at first, but behind the line of trees, someone was watching. Kaya had never gone home. He had hidden near the forest all evening, his heart refusing to leave her alone. He had watched the villagers walk away, one by one, until only silence remained. And then when the moon climbed higher and the world became quiet, he stepped closer. Kaya's feet moved carefully over the soft ground. He wore dark clothes so no one would see him if they looked from the village. He carried nothing but his courage and a small wooden tool he had carved himself. He was afraid, but he kept walking. As he reached the edge of the clearing, he saw his sister's face in the moonlight. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing soft but steady. His heart tightened in his chest. He wanted to call her name out loud, but he knew he couldn't. Instead, he whispered, "Aita." Her eyes opened slowly. At first, she thought she was dreaming. Then she saw him standing there, his face half hidden by the shadows. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from fear, but from the warmth of knowing she wasn't alone. "Kaya," she whispered weakly. He stepped closer, kneeling down beside her. "I'm here," he said softly. "I never left." She wanted to tell him to go back before anyone saw him, but her voice was too weak. He didn't wait for her to speak. He looked around to make sure the coast was clear. The only sounds were the river flowing gently and the quiet night birds singing to each other. Then Kaya began to dig. His hands were quick and careful, removing the sand around her slowly so it wouldn't collapse in the wrong way. The sand was cool against his fingers, but the fear in his chest made him warm. He worked as quietly as he could, glancing around every few minutes. Aita watched him with tired eyes. She wanted to help, but she couldn't move. She whispered, "Why are you doing this?" He didn't look up. "Because you saved someone," he said simply. "Now it's my turn to save you." His words wrapped around her heart like a soft blanket. She closed her eyes again and let the sound of the digging fill the night. Each handful of sand he moved away brought her a little closer to freedom. Time passed slowly. Kaya's hands were tired, but he didn't stop. He thought of the day she had saved the settler child. He had been afraid back then, but she had smiled at him and said, "Kindness is never wrong." Now those words gave him strength. After a long while, he finally reached her arms. He gently brushed away the sand so she could move them. Aita stretched her fingers slowly. It hurt, but it also reminded her she was still alive. "Almost there," Kaya whispered. She nodded weakly. Her eyes lifted to the stars. She thought about how she had come so close to letting go. But now hope was back, breathing quietly beside her in the dark. Then from behind Kaya, two more figures appeared out of the forest. At first, Aita was frightened. She thought someone had found them. But when the moonlight touched their faces, she saw who they were. They were Kaya's two closest friends, Mika and Tayan. They had grown up with the siblings, running through the fields, climbing trees, laughing at night when the fireflies filled the air. They too had never believed Aita deserved to be left here. Kaya looked at them nervously. "You came?" Mika nodded. "Of course," she whispered. "We said we would stand with you." Tayan knelt on the other side of Aita and began to help remove the sand. Their movements were fast but careful, like they were protecting something precious. And in a way they were. The three of them worked together in silence. The moon kept shining above, watching their secret act of love and courage. As the sand loosened around her waist, Aita could finally take deeper breaths. Her heart felt lighter. She whispered a soft thank you, and the wind seemed to carry her words like a promise. But they all knew they didn't have much time. The tribe sometimes sent people to check the riverbank in the early morning. If they were caught, the punishment would fall on them too. When the last of the sand around her legs was finally moved away, Kaya helped her stand slowly. Her body was weak and stiff, and her legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. Mika and Tayan held her on each side to keep her from falling. Aita took her first step out of the sand, and it felt like stepping into a new world. The cool earth beneath her feet was soft and real. She looked around at the dark forest, and for the first time in many hours, she felt hope growing strong again. "We can't stay here," Kaya said softly. We have to go. Tyon nodded. I know a trail through the forest that no one uses anymore. It leads to the Hidden Valley. The Hidden Valley was a place whispered about in stories. It was deep in the forest where the trees grew tall and thick and the water was fresh and clear. Few people knew how to reach it, and those who did rarely spoke of it. They moved slowly at first, helping Aida walk. The night was their friend, wrapping them in shadows. Owls called softly from the trees and the wind rustled through the leaves. The forest was alive, but it felt safe, almost as if it was guiding them. Aida leaned on her brother's shoulder. Every step was a quiet victory. She thought of the moment earlier when she had closed her eyes and accepted her fate. Now she was moving forward step by step toward something unknown. They walked for hours, following the faint trail Tyon remembered. At times they had to climb over fallen branches or move through narrow paths where the moonlight barely touched the ground. But they didn't stop. Their breaths became steady, their hearts focused. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to appear on the horizon, they reached the valley. The air was fresh and smelled of moss and flowers. A small stream ran through the center, its water sparkling softly in the early light. Birds began to sing their morning songs. Aida sank down on the soft grass near the stream. Her legs were trembling, but her heart was full. Kaya knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her face. She smiled at him, a tired, beautiful smile that spoke louder than words. Mika and Tyon sat close by, their faces calm but determined. They all knew what this meant. By helping Aida, they had chosen a path that might change everything. But none of them felt regret. Aida cupped some of the cold stream water in her hands and drank slowly. It tasted like life itself. She closed her eyes and let the sun warm her face. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. In the days that followed, whispers spread quietly through the tribe. Some believed Aida had been taken by the earth. Others suspected something else but said nothing. A few, deep in their hearts, hoped she was alive somewhere. Time moved on. The forest kept its secret. And deep in the Hidden Valley, Aida began a new life with those who believed in kindness over fear. She grew stronger each day. Years later, the tribe changed. The world changed too. The elders grew older, and new voices began to rise. Voices that remembered Aida's act of mercy. Some of those voices belonged to the very children she had once cared for. When Aida finally returned to her people, she was no longer the young woman who had stood alone on the riverbank. She was a symbol of quiet strength, of kindness that does not fade even in the face of judgment. People listened to her story. Some cried. Some understood for the first time. And slowly the tribe began to open its heart, learning that sometimes kindness can protect just as much as tradition can. Kaya stood beside her that day, proud and strong. Mika and Tyon were there too, smiling softly. And the wind moved gently through the trees, as if carrying a message to every corner of the land. Love has power, and courage can change even the oldest ways. Aida lifted her face toward the sun. The same sun that had once burned above her when she thought her life was ending now warmed her, as a woman who had lived, loved, and returned. Her heart whispered a silent truth. Sometimes the greatest stories are not about battles, but about hearts that refuse to give up.